Today, I'm going to tell you a story so brutal it shattered an entire frontier town, set against the burning silence of the Old West. This was a land of dust and gun smoke, where law ended at the edge of firelight, and fate collided with violence in a single night. It all began with one small act of mercy, so simple, yet powerful enough to redraw the line between survival and extinction. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Arizona Territory, 1867. The last amber light of evening spilled through the narrow windows of the schoolhouse as Ilyra Knoxen straightened her desk for the morning ahead. At 24, she had spent 3 hard years carving out a life of her own in the mining town of Copper Ridge. Far from Boston's tight drawing rooms, far from polite suffocation, and far from the quiet humiliation that had followed Valor Bryce's betrayal. Miss Knoxen. Ilyra looked up to see Nyra Vale, the blacksmith's 10-year-old daughter, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "I finished it," Nyra said, holding out a small, worn book with unmistakable pride. "Just like you asked." Ilyra smiled as she took the dog-eared copy of Little Women from the girl's hands. "And what did you think of Jo?" Nyra's eyes lit up. "She reminds me of you. Strong. Not scared to say what she thinks." Warmth crept into Ilyra's cheeks. In Boston, such traits had earned her little more than whispered criticism. Here, on the rough edge of the frontier, they had become her shield. "You'd better head home," Ilyra said gently, glancing toward the darkening sky. "Your father will be worrying." After Nyra left, Ilyra gathered her belongings, blew out the lantern, and locked the schoolhouse behind her. The walk to her cabin at the edge of town followed a path she knew by heart. Past the general store, where Halvek Morin extended credit when the mines ran thin. Past the saloon, where she never lingered. And finally, by the sheriff's office, where Oris Coyle tipped his hat with practiced courtesy. "Evening, Miss Knoxen," the sheriff called. "Sheriff," she replied with a nod. "Quiet day?" he said. "As quiet as one can hope for." Yet something in his expression made her slow. His jaw was tight, his eyes uneasy. "I've heard talk," Oris said carefully. "The Pale Iron Men have been moving north from Tucson." Ilyra's heart stuttered. The Pale Iron Men, brutal, lawless, and merciless, especially toward women. "I thought they were driven into Mexico." "So did we," Oris replied grimly. "Lock your doors tonight." Ilyra hurried the rest of the way home, the warning echoing louder with every step. Inside her cabin, she bolted the door, drew the curtains, and lit a small oil lamp. The room held few possessions, mostly books, a change of clothes, and a faded photograph of her parents, gone 5 years now. Sleep came in restless fragments, haunted by dreams of Boston parlors and Valor's smile that never quite reached his eyes. In her dreams, she heard horses, distant at first, then closer. When she jolted awake, the sound had not faded. Gunfire split the night. Screams followed. Ilyra leapt from her bed, fingers clumsy as she reached for her robe. Orange firelight danced across her walls. Heart pounding, she cracked the door and looked out. Riders, no fewer than 20, stormed down the main street, torches raised, rifles flashing. Garen Slade had come. Frozen in terror, Ilyra watched flames consume the general store. Halvek Morin burst through the doorway, only to fall as a shot struck him down. Isela Morin followed, her scream cut short just the same. The saloon caught next. Then the bank. When the riders turned toward the row of homes, Ilyra knew she could not stay. She pulled on her clothes, grabbed her mother's locket, the small pouch of coins she had saved, and her father's old pocket knife. Slipping out the back window, she vanished into the darkness just as fire swallowed her front porch. She ran toward the hills, driven by the screams behind her. A bullet tore past her ear, splintering the bark of a nearby pine. She ducked, breath tearing from her chest, and plunged deeper into the night. Dawn found her curled in a narrow ravine, miles from what remained of Copper Ridge. Smoke still rose in the distance, a gray scar against the pink morning sky. Her throat burned with thirst. Her feet bled from the stones beneath her thin shoes. Her dress hung in tatters, her face streaked with soot and tears. For 3 days she wandered, surviving on rainwater trapped in rock hollows and the few berries she knew were safe. On the 4th day, weak and swaying, she crested a ridge and saw it, a cavalry outpost below. Hope surged through her, carrying her down the slope, until she drew close enough to see the truth. The fort stood abandoned, doors yawning open, supplies scattered. "They left 2 weeks ago." The voice came from behind her. Ilyra spun, fumbling for her knife. The man standing there made her blood run cold. Tall, copper-skinned, black hair bound into 2 long braids, buckskin leggings, a cotton shirt, a bandana tied across his brow. His face was unreadable as stone. Most terrifying of all were his eyes, dark, steady, and fixed on her without mercy. Stories had drifted through Copper Ridge like ghost tales, scalping, torture, women taken and never returned. Ilyra raised the knife, though her hand shook. "Stay back," she warned, her voice cracking. The man did not move. "That blade will not save you from thirst," he said calmly, his English accented but precise. "Nor from the men who are hunting you." Her heart skipped. "What men?" "The ones who destroyed your town." He gestured south. "They search for survivors." Fear seized her anew. "How do you know about Copper Ridge?" "I saw the smoke. I watched them kill." His expression never shifted. "You are the schoolteacher," he said. It was not a question. Ilyra swallowed hard. "How would you know that?" "I have seen you," Otto said. "With the children." He stepped closer. Ilyra Knoxen backed away until her shoulders struck the sun-bleached wall of the abandoned fort. "You have 2 paths," he continued evenly. "Stay here and die, by thirst, by bullets, or by the desert, or come with me." "Why would you help me?" Ilyra demanded, her knife still raised. Something shifted in his eyes, not warmth, not mercy, but a thinning of the ice. "I have my reasons. What is your name?" she asked, trying to measure the danger in the offer. "My people call me Ahto." "Like the bull?" The word slipped out before she could stop herself. A slight nod. "For stubbornness." "And yours?" "Ilyra. Ilyra Knoxen." Ahto studied her in silence. "The men who hunt you will reach this place before sundown. Decide now, Ilyra Knoxen." The wind carried a distant sound, horses thin and rising from the south. Ilyra thought of Garen Slade, of what the Pale Iron Men had done to Isella Morin. She looked at Ahto's unreadable face and chose. "I will go with you." Without another word, he turned and led her away from the fort toward the long shadows of the mountains. Ilyra followed, leaving behind the last scraps of the life she had built, stepping into the unknown beside a man whose people were monsters in the stories white settlers told. The irony was not lost on her. Fleeing the cruelty of white men she had seen with her own eyes into the protection of an Apache warrior whose cruelty she knew only through rumor. By sunset, they had crossed miles of broken ground. Ilyra's feet, already torn from days of flight, left dark specks of blood on the stone. Ahto moved with quiet purpose, stopping now and then to listen, to scan the horizon. He offered no comfort, no reassurance. As night settled in, he guided her to a small cave carved into the hillside. "Rest," he said. The first word he had spoken in hours. From a pouch at his belt, he produced dried meat and a water skin. "Eat, then sleep." Ilyra tore into the tough, salty meat and drank deeply, though she knew better than to waste water. "Thank you," she murmured. Ahto did not reply. He moved to the mouth of the cave and sat there, a dark outline against the falling night. "Where are we going?" she asked. For a moment she thought he would ignore her. "To my people." "And what happens to me there?" He turned, moonlight catching one side of his face. "That depends on what you are willing to do to survive." A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the desert air. "What does that mean?" "A woman alone has no place among my people," he said quietly. "Or yours." He paused. "But a wife would be protected." Understanding came slowly. "You want me to marry you?" The idea felt impossible. "It would be a marriage of protection only," Ahto said, his tone plain. "You would have food, shelter, safety." "And what would you have?" Ilyra asked, suspicion flaring. "My reasons are my own." Then, seeing the fear in her eyes, he added, "I will not touch you. That is not why I make this offer." Ilyra wrapped her arms around herself, her thoughts racing. Marriage to an Apache warrior. Everything about it defied the world she had known. Yet what choice remained? Return to white settlements where Garen Slade might still be hunting her, where a woman alone invited danger. "I need time," she said at last. "Until morning," Ahto agreed, turning back to his watch. Ilyra lay on the cold stone, certain sleep would never come. But exhaustion dragged her under. Nightmares followed. Burning buildings, Valor Bryce's betrayal, blended with strange new dreams of desert horizons and a pair of dark eyes that revealed nothing, yet missed nothing. Morning arrived sharp and unforgiving. Ahto was already preparing to leave. "Have you decided?" he asked. Ilyra pushed herself upright, wincing as pain flared through her blistered feet. Daylight stripped the night's conversation of illusion, but not of truth. "Yes," she said, steadier than she felt. "I accept, but there will be conditions." His brow lifted slightly, the first expression she had seen from him. "This arrangement is temporary," Ilyra continued, "until I can establish myself safely elsewhere. And as you said, there will be no marital expectations." "Is that all?" he asked, a trace of something like amusement in his voice. She lifted her chin. "I will not be treated as property. I enter this agreement by choice, for mutual benefit." Ahto regarded her for a long moment. "Among my people, women are not owned," he said. "They are the strength of the family, the heart of the tribe." He stepped closer, filling the narrow space. "My protection comes with respect, Ilyra Knoxen. Do not mistake my silence for contempt." Something in his words, his quiet certainty, caught her off guard. For the first time she saw him not as a savage, nor merely a rescuer, but as a man. "Then we have an agreement," she said softly. Ahto nodded once. "We travel now. The journey will be long." They set out as the morning sun climbed higher, throwing sharp shadows across the desert floor. Ilyra Knoxen's feet screamed with every step, but she swallowed her pain and kept moving. Ahto noticed anyway. By midday, he halted beside a narrow stream cutting through the stone. "Remove your shoes," he said. Ilyra hesitated, then obeyed. Her stockings were shredded. Her feet were raw, split, and bleeding. Without a word, Ahto lowered himself in front of her. From a leather pouch, he drew crushed herbs blended with animal fat. His hands, large, steady, spread the salve across her wounds with unexpected care. Cool relief eased the burning almost at once. "Thank you," Ilyra whispered, unsettled by his closeness, by the gentleness of a man she had been taught to fear. Otto only nodded. He tore strips from his own shirt and wrapped her feet carefully. "These will hold until we reach the camp," he said. "There, you will have proper moccasins." As they continued, Ilyra found herself watching him, the straight line of his back, the quiet certainty of his stride. She had grown up on stories of savagery, yet this man showed only discipline and a stern, measured regard. "How did you learn English so well?" she asked, as they threaded through a narrow canyon. Ahto remained silent long enough that she thought he would not answer. "I was taken to a white man's school when I was a boy." 7 years lay heavy in those words. "I'm sorry," Ilyra said softly. "For what?" he asked, without turning. "For being taken from your family." This time he stopped. He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. "Most white women would say it was for my own good," he said, "to civilize the savage." Ilyra met his gaze without flinching. "I've seen enough of civilization these past days to doubt its virtue." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or reconsideration. With a slight nod, he turned and resumed walking. The silence between them shifted, no longer empty. As the sun dipped low on their second day, they crested a rise overlooking a hidden valley. Below, nestled against the mountain's base, lay the Apache camp. Dozens of wickiups formed a loose circle. Smoke curled from cooking fires. Women moved between shelters. Children ran and laughed. Warriors stood watch along the edges. "Your people," Ilyra murmured, tension flooding her veins. "Our people now," Ahto corrected, "if you still accept our arrangement." Ilyra drew a steadying breath. "I do." Ahto searched her face, as if testing for doubt. "Then come," he said. "We will be married before the sun sets." With every step toward the camp, Ilyra felt eyes upon them. Women paused in their work. Children fell silent. Warriors straightened. Ahto walked forward with his head held high, not proud, but unmistakably dignified. An elderly woman emerged from the largest wickiup. Her face was deeply lined, her posture commanding despite her age. "My grandmother," Ahto said quietly. "Senai. She carries the wisdom of our clan." Senai approached, her dark eyes assessing Ilyra's torn dress, her bandaged feet, the exhaustion etched across her face. Without warning, the old woman took Ilyra's face between weathered hands, turning it as if judging stone for flaws. Ilyra stiffened, resisting the urge to pull away. Senai spoke in Apache, sharp, flowing words Ilyra could not understand. Ahto answered in the same tongue, respectful yet firm. Whatever he said made Senai's brows rise. She released Ilyra and circled her slowly, continuing to speak, the name Ahto repeating like a question. At last, Senai stopped before her and shifted into heavily accented English. "My grandson says you will be his wife," she said, "that he found you alone after white men destroyed your home." "Yes," Ilyra said, steadying her voice. "That is true." "Why should we accept you?" Senai demanded. "A white woman. The army hunts us, kills us. Your kind steals our land." Ilyra met her gaze. "I have no kind anymore. The men you speak of killed everyone I knew, burned everything I had." She swallowed, then continued. "I seek only survival. I offer respect in return." Senai's eyes narrowed as she weighed her words. Then she turned and spoke to Ahto again in Apache. He answered with a single word. "Come," Senai said to Ilyra at last. "If you are to be Ahto's wife, you cannot look like a white teacher." The spirits must bless this union before the moon rises. What followed was both humbling and quietly transformative. Inside Senai's wickiup, Ilyra Knoxen was relieved of her torn dress and undergarments. Senai and two younger women worked without ceremony, scrubbing her skin with water steeped in herbs, untangling her hair, then braiding it with practiced hands. They dressed her in a simple buckskin gown, softened by wear and decorated with careful beadwork. Throughout the process, they spoke among themselves in Apache, their low laughter making it clear Ilyra was the subject of their commentary. When they were finished, Senai lifted a polished strip of metal and held it before her. Ilyra scarcely recognized the reflection. The dust-streaked, sunburned schoolteacher was gone. In her place stood someone altered, not Apache, not the woman she had been in Boston, but something caught between two worlds. "Now," Senai said, "you will be married." Outside, the people had formed a wide circle. Ahto stood at its center, dressed in ceremonial buckskins. His chest was bare, marked with red and white symbols. Ilyra was guided forward, acutely aware of the weight of countless eyes upon her. The ceremony was brief. Senai officiated in Apache, her voice steady and solemn. Ilyra understood none of the words, yet felt their gravity. Ahto took her hands in his grip firm, controlled. He did not look away as Senai bound their wrists together with a leather cord. When it ended, the camp erupted in shouts and calls that Ilyra assumed were blessings, though not every face was welcoming. Some were wary, a few openly resentful. Ahto led her to a wickiup set slightly apart from the rest. "This is your home now," he said, lifting the entrance flap. Inside, the space was simple but orderly. Furs laid for sleeping, a small fire pit, baskets stocked with supplies. Ilyra stood uncertainly, suddenly aware that they were alone, married, sharing a space meant for intimacy. As if sensing her thoughts, Ahto moved to the far side of the shelter. "I will sleep there," he said, indicating a spot near the entrance. "You will have privacy." He gestured to a sleeping area partly screened by a hanging blanket. Ilyra nodded, relief mingling with something she could not yet name. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for honoring our agreement." Ahto studied her for a moment. "Rest now. Tomorrow you will learn what is expected of a wife among my people." With that, he stepped outside, leaving her alone with the weight of what she had become. From respected schoolteacher to hunted survivor to Apache wife, all within a single week. That night, Ilyra lay on the surprisingly soft furs and heard Ahto return, settling into his place apart. Slowly, the sounds of the camp faded. In the darkness, she allowed herself to weep. Tears for her students, for Naira Vale, for Corvin Vale, for Halvek Morin and Isela Morin, for Copper Ridge and the life she had lost. And threaded through that grief was uncertainty about the life she had just chosen, however temporary, bound to a man as unreadable as the desert itself. Days turned into weeks. Each morning before dawn, Ilyra joined the other women at the stream. They hauled water, scrubbed clothes, and worked in near silence, broken only by words of Apache she could not understand. Their treatment of her ranged from wary curiosity to open coldness. Only Senai softened. The old woman claimed Ilyra as her responsibility, teaching her the skills required to survive among the people. "No, no," Senai scolded, as Ilyra struggled to grind corn between stones. "You will ruin your wrists. Let the stone work." Ilyra adjusted, sweat running down her temples beneath the harsh midday sun. "Like this?" Senai gave a brief nod. "For a white woman, you are not entirely useless." From Senai, it was high praise. True to his word, Ahto kept his distance, He left before dawn, and often returned only after Ilyra had withdrawn behind her screen. When they spoke, it was practical. Warnings about wandering, instructions on plants to avoid, reminders of customs she must respect. Yet she often felt his gaze on her as she worked among the women. Not threatening, but watchful, as if measuring her endurance. One evening, as Ilyra sat outside their wickiup mending a basket under Senai's supervision, a ripple of tension passed through the camp. Warriors gathered quickly. Women ushered children inside. Even the dogs stiffened, alert. Octo approached, his expression hard. "Go inside," he said. "Stay there until I return." "What's happening?" Ilyra asked. "Soldiers," he replied. "A patrol approaches from the north." Fear clenched her chest. "Will there be fighting?" "We will hide," Octo said. "This place is well concealed, but we must be careful." His eyes lingered on her pale skin, her lighter hair, features that marked her instantly. "You must remain unseen," he added. Understanding struck. "Because I'm white, they would think your people took me." Otto nodded once. It would give them the excuse they seek. That night, Ilyra lay awake, listening to distant horses and muted voices, grateful for the camp's concealment, and for the absolute silence the Apache kept, even as danger passed close enough to be felt. Even the children seemed to sense the weight of what hovered over the camp. Otto did not return until long past midnight. Unable to sleep, Ilyra Knoxen waited behind the hanging blanket, alert to every sound. She heard him enter the wickiup and eased the screen aside. He stood outlined against the fading coals of the fire, removing his weapons. In the low light, she caught a dark sheen along his arm. "You're hurt," she said, stepping fully into view. Octo glanced at the deep cut on his upper arm, blood flowing freely. "It is nothing." Ilyra recognized the familiar stubborn pride of men accustomed to pain. "Sit down. Let me see it, please." To her surprise, he complied, lowering himself beside the fire. She gathered water and clean cloths, kneeling to inspect the wound. "What happened?" she asked, as she gently wiped away the blood. "A soldier saw movement," Otto said. "He fired blindly into the brush." Her hands stilled. "You could have been killed." "But I was not." His voice stayed even, though his muscles tightened beneath her touch. She examined the cut more closely. "This needs stitches. Senai is asleep and it's bleeding too much." Ilyra stood and retrieved the small sewing kit she had carried from Copper Ridge. "I've done this before, for injured miners." Otto studied her face for a long moment, then gave a single nod. Working quickly by firelight, she sterilized the needle in the flames and threaded it carefully. "This will hurt," she warned. "Pain is a teacher," Octo replied. She began, impressed by how still he remained as the needle passed through his skin again and again. Only the faint flare of his nostrils betrayed the strain. Up close, details emerged. The tattoo circling his bicep, the old scars tracing a history she could only imagine, the surprising softness of his dark hair when it brushed her fingers. "Why did you agree to marry me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Otto's dark eyes fixed on her. "You needed protection." "There are many who need protection," Ilyra countered, tying off another stitch. "Why me?" He was silent so long she thought he would not answer. Then, quietly enough that she nearly missed it, he said, "I know what it is to lose everything." Her hands paused. "What did you lose?" "My wife, my son." His voice did not waver, but something deeper than pain surfaced in his eyes. 3 winters ago, he continued. Smallpox, brought by traders. The truth struck her hard. He had never spoken of a family. "I'm sorry," she whispered, moved by this glimpse into his private grief. Ahto nodded once, accepting the words without comment. "Is that why?" Ilyra hesitated, then pressed on. "You said you would not expect certain things from our marriage, because you were still mourning them?" His gaze sharpened. "I made that promise because it was what you needed to hear, because you had already suffered enough violence from men." The clarity of his insight, and the respect behind it, caught her off guard. She finished the final stitch in silence and wrapped his arm in clean cloth. "Thank you," Ahto said. "You're welcome," Ilyra replied, suddenly aware of how close they sat, of the intimacy of tending his wound in the quiet of their shared shelter. Something softened in his expression, barely perceptible in the dim light. For a moment, neither moved, caught in a current neither had anticipated. Then Ahto rose smoothly, breaking it. "You should rest. Tomorrow will bring new challenges." Ilyra retreated behind the screen, but sleep refused to come. Her thoughts replayed their exchange, reshaping the stoic warrior she had married. He had been a husband, a father. He had loved and lost. Knowing this made him more human to her, and far more dangerous to her resolve to keep their union purely practical. The days that followed brought rising tension. Scouts reported the soldier patrol had established a temporary camp barely 10 miles away, far too close. The tribe prepared to move, dismantling their shelters and packing for an early journey to the winter grounds. Ilyra worked alongside the women, learning to take down the wickiup and load supplies onto travois. To her surprise, some of the younger women began speaking to her in halting English or through gestures, teaching her essential Apache words and correcting her attempts with quiet laughter. On the third night of preparation, as Ilyra sat with the women readying food for the journey, a sudden stir rippled along the edge of camp. 2 warriors rode in at full gallop, speaking urgently to the council that gathered to meet them. Ahto found her moments later, his expression grave. "Come," Ahto said, taking Ilyra Knoxen's arm and guiding her away from the curious stares of the others. When they were out of earshot, his voice dropped, urgent and controlled. "The Pale Iron Men have been seen nearby." Her breath caught. "Garin Slade's men?" "They are riding with the soldiers now," he continued. "They call themselves scouts. They are showing photographs. They are asking about survivors." Cold spread through her veins. "They're looking for me." "Yes." "One of our scouts heard them describing a schoolteacher who escaped. They are offering rewards for information." Fear surged, sharp and dizzying. "Then we have to leave." "Now." "No," Ahto said firmly. She stared at him. "No?" "They are watching the trails we would have to take. Moving now would endanger the people, especially with you among us." "Then I should go," Ilyra said, the words tearing free. "I'll draw them away. Give your people time." Ahto's hand closed around her wrist, firm yet unexpectedly gentle. "You would be captured within a day." "Then what choice do we have?" Panic crept into her voice. His eyes held hers, steady, unshaken. "You must become Apache in truth, not only in appearance." She struggled to understand. "You mean a ceremony? Something sacred?" "Yes, one that binds you to the people in the eyes of the spirits, in ways marriage alone does not." Ilyra searched his face. "How would that protect us?" "If we are stopped," he said, "you will be my wife in every way they can see. Your movements, your manner, your understanding of our ways. They will see you are not a captive, but a willing part of the tribe. Can something like that be learned so quickly?" "Not learned," Ahto replied. "Transformed." He hesitated. "It is not done lightly." A weight settled over her. Once I do this, a part of you will always belong to the people, he said. To this land. What he offered was no disguise. It was initiation, a surrender of the last pieces of who she had been. But that woman, the teacher of Copper Ridge, was already gone, buried with the town itself. What must I do? She asked quietly. The ceremony began at dusk. Under Sinai's direction, Ilyra was cleansed within a sweat lodge. Her skin was marked with sacred symbols, her hair woven with beads and feathers. She drank a bitter, earthy tea Sinai said would open her sight beyond ordinary seeing. When night fully claimed the land, Ilyra was led to a ring of stones beyond the camp. Firelight danced across faces gathered in silence. Drums began. Slow, steady, echoing like a heartbeat she felt in her chest. Ahto stood at the center, his body painted with different symbols than hers, but just as deliberate. When she stepped into the circle, he extended his hands. She placed hers in his, grounding herself in the strength of his grip. What followed was both frightening and elevating. The drums, the chanting, the fire, and perhaps the tea blurred the edges of the world. Ilyra felt herself stretch beyond her body, touching the earth beneath her feet, the sky overhead, the gathered souls around her. Visions came, soaring with eagles over endless desert, running with wolves through moonlit canyons, standing rooted like ancient trees as seasons turned. Through it all, Ahto anchored her, his presence constant, his eyes reflecting the same journey. At the ceremony's peak, Sinai bound their hands with a cord woven of horsehair, speaking words Ilyra somehow understood without knowing their language. The tribe answered as one, voices rising into the stars. Then Ahto did something unexpected. He drew her into his arms and kissed her. It was not part of the ritual. She knew that instantly. The contact was brief, warm, steady, charged with meaning. When he pulled back, his eyes searched her face, waiting for fear or rejection. She felt neither. Only a sudden, undeniable sense of belonging, something she had never known in Boston society, nor on the frontier, nor anywhere else. Now, Ahto said softly, you are truly my wife. That night, the privacy screen remained folded away. They slept in the same space for the first time. They did not touch, yet Ilyra was keenly aware of him beside her, and of the bond between them, deeper than any agreement they had made before. At first light, the tribe moved out, traveling along hidden mountain paths with practiced precision. Ilyra rode behind Ahto, her arms around his waist, her body learning the rhythm of his horse, of his movement. They traveled in small groups scattered across miles, harder to follow, harder to trap. On the third day, the test came. A bend in the trail opened suddenly onto armed cavalry, rifles lifted at the sight of Apache riders. Hold, the officer commanded, as Ahto's group reined in. State your business in this territory. Ahto answered in calm, deliberate English. We are traveling to our winter grounds. We have authorization from the Indian agent. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed, then shifted to Ilyra. Ma'am, he said sharply, are you being held against your will? Ilyra felt the tension ripple through Ahto's body. This was the moment they had prepared for. Drawing on everything the ceremony had carved into her, every lesson absorbed in weeks among the people. Ilyra Knoxen straightened in the saddle, her spine aligned, her expression calm, reserved, the way she had seen Apache women face strangers. Her hands rested firmly at Ahto's waist. I am here by my own will, she said evenly. I ride with my husband and our people. The officer's eyes narrowed. Your husband? He pressed. You claim this union willingly? She is my wife, Otto answered before Ilyra could speak again. His voice carried quiet authority. We travel with my grandmother and kin to join the winter gathering. Another rider pushed forward, his gaze locking onto Ilyra with unsettling intensity. Lieutenant, this could be the schoolteacher Garen Slade has been searching for, the one who escaped that mining town. Her pulse jolted, but her face did not betray it. I know nothing of any mining town, Ilyra replied steadily. I have lived with the people since my parents died of fever 2 winters ago. The lieutenant's eyes moved slowly, from her braided hair to the buckskin dress to the painted markings on her hands. What's your name, ma'am? Without hesitation, she answered, Ashvale. The name Senai had given her, Beauty of Sunrise. The soldier who had spoken earlier dismounted. Let me get a closer look, Lieutenant. Ilyra felt Otto's body tighten beneath her, coiled and ready. The moment stretched thin as a drawn blade. Then another voice cut through the tension. Stand down, Corporal. A cavalry captain rode into view, his coat dusted from the trail, authority unmistakable. Lieutenant Bram Kessler, report. Sir, Kessler said quickly, we encountered this Apache group. The woman appears white. There's reason to believe she may be the missing schoolteacher. The captain studied Ilyra carefully. Then his attention shifted to Otto. Recognition flickered. Otto, he said slowly. It's been some time. To Ilyra's surprise, Otto inclined his head. Captain Elroy Vask. You know each other? Kessler asked, incredulous. Otto scouted for us during the Comanche campaign of '62, Vask replied. One of the finest trackers I've ever worked with. His gaze returned to Ilyra. And this is your wife? Yes, Otto confirmed. Vask considered that, then nodded. The Apache don't take white captives anymore. Too much trouble. If she says she's his wife, I see no reason to doubt her. He turned sharply to the persistent soldier. As for Slade's schoolteacher, there's no proof she survived that attack. Let them pass. Sir, our orders. Our orders, Vask cut in firmly, are to maintain peace with cooperative tribes. This group has shown no threat. He tipped his head to Otto. Safe passage to your winter grounds. Otto returned the nod with measured dignity. Thank you, Captain. As they rode on, Ilyra kept her posture rigid, aware of eyes burning into her back. Only once the soldiers vanished behind the bend did she sag forward, trembling, pressing her forehead against Otto's shoulder. You did well, he said quietly. The captain knew you, she murmured. Yes. His voice carried layered emotion. From a time when I believed cooperation might protect my people. And did it? For a season. The bitterness beneath his words needed no explanation. They rode in silence until Ilyra spoke again. The man who recognized me. He was one of Garen Slade's pale iron men, wasn't he? Pretending to be a soldier. Otto stiffened. Yes, I recognized him as well, but he could not act with the captain present. And when the captain isn't? Fear crept back into her voice. Otto reached down, covering her hand where it rested at his waist, a rare, grounding touch. We will reach the winter grounds tomorrow. There, among all our people, we will be safer. The winter grounds were nothing like Ilyra had imagined. Not an open camp on the plains, but a hidden settlement cradled within a canyon. Natural caves, reinforced with brush and wickiups, housed dozens of families. A clear stream cut through the center, while sheer cliffs offered protection and watch points carved by centuries of use. The gathering tribe was far larger than the band she had known. As Otto's group arrived, voices rose in greeting. Gestures of welcome followed. Ilyra noticed the looks she received. Curious, measuring, but not hostile. Many bands come here for winter, Otto explained as he helped her down. Some have never seen a white woman living as Apache. Senai approached, speaking rapidly to Otto in their language. He answered, gesturing toward the mountains behind them. Concern tightened the old woman's expression. "What is it?" Ilyra asked when they paused. "The men of Slade are still hunting," Otto said quietly. "My grandmother says other bands crossed their trail. They're offering more money now, for any word of you." The familiar grip of fear tightened in Ilyra Knoxen's chest. "They won't stop, will they?" "No," Otto replied without hesitation. "Men like Slade never do. Pride won't allow it." That evening, Ilyra was brought before the larger council, including the chief, Rauk, a weathered man whose stern presence echoed Otto's own. The council listened as Otto spoke, their eyes shifting between him and Ilyra, some cautious, others openly distrustful. When the discussion moved fully into Apache, Ilyra lost the thread, though the rising tension was unmistakable. At last, Rauk lifted his hand, quieting the circle. He spoke directly to Otto, his voice firm but measured. Later, in their new dwelling, a shallow cave reinforced with wiki-up walls, Otto explained the decision. "We will stay through winter. In spring, Rauk believes we must go farther west, beyond the reach of soldiers and men like Slade. Farther from white settlements," Ilyra said softly. Otto nodded. "Safer for everyone." She sat on the sleeping furs, absorbing the weight of it. "And I would go with you." She studied his face in the firelight. "Our agreement was meant to last only until I could safely return to my world." Otto knelt before her, his expression more open than she had ever seen. "Is that still what you want? To return to a world that failed you? That still hunts you?" The question struck deep. Copper Ridge was gone. Ashes and ghosts. Even if she found another town, another schoolhouse, Slade's shadow would follow. And now, after the ceremony, after weeks among the people, the thought of returning felt not only dangerous but empty. "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted. Otto reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek, the first touch not born of ritual or necessity. "Then stay," he said gently. "Until you do." Warmth spread through her, low and steady, ignited by something long building. Ilyra leaned into his hand without thinking, holding his gaze. "Otto," she whispered, unsure of the question she was asking. He understood. Slowly, deliberately, he kissed her. Nothing like the brief ritual before. This kiss lingered, deepened. Her hands found his shoulders, grounding herself in the strength that had become her anchor. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with feeling. "Our agreement," he said roughly, "can change, if you wish it." Her heart raced. This was the moment when pretense gave way to truth. She thought of Valor Briss in Boston, false promises, hollow words, then looked at Otto, a man who had never broken a vow. "I do wish it," she said. That night, their marriage was made whole, not with conquest, but with tenderness that belied the warrior he was. In his arms, Ilyra discovered a passion she hadn't known she carried. Later, resting against his chest, she felt a belonging that crossed culture, race, and every boundary she had once believed fixed. As winter deepened, so did their bond. Ilyra became fully woven into the life of the tribe, learning crafts, cooking, even the basics of hunting. The women who once watched her with suspicion now welcomed her, teaching their language with patient smiles. Senai observed her transformation with reserved approval. One evening, as they scraped hides together, the old woman spoke. "You have changed," she said in accented English. When my grandson brought you, I thought you would run at the first chance." "Back to my people?" Ilyra replied, guiding the scraper across the hide. "I've learned my people aren't as simple as I believed." Senai nodded slowly. "The spirits saw this. That is why they welcomed you." She paused, fixing Ilyra with a penetrating gaze. "My grandson, after his wife and son died, he was empty. Walking, eating, fighting, but dead here." She tapped her chest. "Now he lives again." Heat rose to Ilyra's cheeks. "I never expected to feel for him as I do." "Love comes like rain in the desert," Senai said softly. "Rare, precious, making life where there was only dust." The word lingered between them. Was that what Ilyra felt, for Atto? This fierce loyalty, this quiet peace, this fire sparked by a single look. It was nothing she had been taught to expect. And yet it was everything. This was nothing like what she had once felt for Valor Brasses back in Boston. No polite courtship shaped by manners and expectation. This feeling was raw and elemental, like the land itself. Sometimes unforgiving, yet honest and sustaining. As if drawn by her thoughts, Atto emerged at the edge of the central clearing, returning from a hunt with several warriors. Even from afar, Ilyra Knoxen sensed trouble in the rigid set of his shoulders, the sharp urgency with which the men moved toward the chief's dwelling. Senai noticed as well. "Go," she told Ilyra quietly. "See what burdens them." By the time Ilyra reached their cave home, Atto was already inside, strapping on weapons with quick, efficient movements. "What happened?" she asked, fear tightening her chest at the sight of his preparations. Atto looked up, his face carved with gravity. "Men of Garen Slade attacked one of our hunting parties near the eastern ridge. 2 warriors were killed." "They took their scalps," he added. Horror washed through her. "Because of me? Are they coming here?" "No," Atto said firmly. "This is not because of you." He secured a blade against his thigh. "They wanted an excuse, to hunt Apache, to force us into open conflict so they can bring the army down on us all." "You're going after them," Ilyra realized, panic rising. "How many?" 6, maybe 8. We will ride 12. "Atto, please." She caught his arm. "These men destroyed an entire town." He framed her face with his hands. "And they will destroy my people if we show fear. This is our way. We defend what is ours." The finality in his voice told her there would be no arguing. This was the warrior he was, unyielding, bound by duty and honor. "When?" she asked softly. "Within the hour." He brushed his thumbs across her cheeks. "Be strong. Listen to Senai." He hesitated only once. "If I do not return, she will know what must be done." The ground seemed to fall away beneath her. Losing him now, just as she had found this life, felt unbearable. "Promise you'll come back," she demanded, gripping his wrists. Atto met her gaze. "I promise to fight with everything I am to return to you." She knew it was the only promise he could truthfully give. Ilyra rose onto her toes and kissed him, pouring into it all the fear and love she could not speak. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I fight for our future," he said quietly, "for all we might still build." Then he turned and was gone. She watched as the warriors gathered, painting their faces, checking weapons, mounting horses. She saw the pride of the women sending them off, the hard acceptance of loss already known. When Atto rode past, their eyes locked for one fierce heartbeat. Then he vanished into the winter twilight. The waiting was agony. Hours stretched into days. Ilyra worked alongside the women, forcing her hands to move while fear followed her like a shadow. At night, she lay alone in the firs, remembering the warmth of his body, the steady strength of his arms. On the third evening, as food was being prepared, a cry rose from the canyon mouth, horses approaching. The camp froze. Riders emerged from the narrow pass, Apache warriors returning, but fewer than had left. Ilyra searched frantically. Then she saw him, at the rear, supporting a wounded man across his lap. Relief struck so powerfully her knees nearly failed her. He was alive, bloodied, exhausted, alive. Joy and grief collided as the camp gathered. 3 warriors had not returned. 2 others were badly wounded. Fragments of the story emerged. An abandoned mining camp, a brutal fight. All of the enemy were dead. Garen Slade among them, killed by Achto's hand. When the wounded were tended, and the noise faded, Ilyra found Achto alone by the stream, washing blood from his arms. His face was distant, still half lost to battle. She approached carefully. "You're hurt," she said, seeing a deep gash along his ribs. He glanced down, almost surprised. "It is nothing." "Let me care for it," she insisted, already gathering cloth and herbs Senai had taught her to use. As she worked, she felt him slowly return, from war, from darkness, back to her. Under her steady hands, Otto's body gradually eased, his breath settling into a slower rhythm. "Garen Slade?" she asked at last, her voice barely above the sound of water. "Is he dead?" Otto answered without hesitation. "He will hunt no one again." Her fingers paused against the bandage. The man who had burned her town, slaughtered her neighbors, and chased her across the territory was gone. She expected relief, perhaps even triumph. Instead, a strange emptiness settled in her chest. "Did killing him bring peace to the spirits of your wife and son?" she asked quietly. Achto studied her, surprise flickering before recognition softened his gaze. "Revenge is not peace," he said. "But defending those I love brings a kind of rest." He had nearly spoken the word outright. Ilyra felt it, how close it hovered between them, growing stronger with every shared breath. She finished her work in silence, then sat beside him at the stream's edge. "I was afraid you wouldn't come back," she admitted. Achto took her hand, his scarred fingers threading through hers. "I gave you my word." "Yes," she whispered. "You did." She leaned into his shoulder, grounding herself in the solid truth of him. Alive, present. Around them, the camp settled into evening rhythm. Laughter of children, murmurs near the fires, the soft pulse of ordinary life. For the first time since the pale iron men had thundered into Copper Ridge, the tight knot of terror inside her began to loosen. "What happens now?" she asked. Otto's arm curved around her, pulling her close. "Now we live," he said simply, "day by day, season by season." It was not poetry, no grand vow, yet in its certainty, it was everything she needed. That night, behind the privacy of their dwelling, they came together with the intensity born of survival and separation endured. Later, resting against his chest, Ilyra reflected on the road that had brought her here, from Boston drawing rooms to frontier schoolhouse to an Apache wife. Each step had stripped away illusion, until only truth remained. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, the words unburdened at last. Achto's arms tightened. "And I love you, Ashvale," he replied, using the name Senai had given her, Beauty of Sunrise. "From the moment I saw you standing alone against fate, I knew your spirit matched mine." She smiled against his skin. "Is that why you were so silent at first? Because you were falling in love with me?" A rare, low chuckle vibrated through him. "I was confused. I believed love had died with my family. Then you came, defying everything I thought I knew. His fingers traced her hair with reverent care. The spirit grants second beginnings. They never look the way we expect. She lifted herself onto one elbow, studying his face by firelight. Is that what we are? Yes, Otto said with quiet certainty. For us, and perhaps for our peoples, if others learn to see. It was a fragile hope, but a necessary one. Spring arrived in the Arizona mountains in sudden color. Valleys bloomed where snow had only recently clung. Streams swelled with meltwater from the heights. The tribe prepared to leave the winter grounds. 6 months into her new life, Ilyra moved with practiced confidence. Sun-darkened skin, calloused hands, Apache words shaping naturally on her tongue. You'll want that tighter, Otto said, watching her secure their supplies to the travois. The climb is steep. She adjusted the binding and looked up. Better? He nodded, then surprised her with a brief embrace. Much better, he murmured. Public affection was rare, but all the more precious for it. She lingered a moment before returning to work. Then commotion rippled through the canyon mouth. A rider arrived at speed, a scout sent ahead. He spoke urgently to Chief Rauk, his expression grim. What is it? Ilyra asked. Otto listened, jaw tightening. Soldiers, he said. A new fort, near our summer hunting grounds. Many of them. The future, once finally within reach, had shifted again. A chill settled deep in Ilyra Knoxen's bones. Does this change what we planned? She asked. Before Otto could answer, Senai approached, her lined face resolute. The council gathers, she told him. Now. The discussion lasted for hours. Ilyra waited with the other women, tension tightening with every raised voice drifting from the council space. When Otto finally emerged, storm clouds seemed to follow him. What did they decide? She asked, matching his long strides toward their shelter. We are split, he said curtly. Some, including Rauk, believe we must move farther west. Others say we stand and defend what has always been ours. And you? She pressed. He stopped and turned, fixing her with an intensity that stole her breath. I choose survival. I choose what matters most. She felt the truth of it before he spoke the words. You matter most. The simplicity of the declaration left her unsteady. What does that mean for us? It means I offered another way. He took her hands. Beyond the western mountains there is a valley. Some of our people have already gone there. The army has not reached it. We could build something new, peaceful. You want to leave the tribe? The thought startled her. He was deeply rooted here, respected, bound to tradition. Not leave, he corrected. Lead those who wish to follow. The weight of it pressed down on her. Because of me? She asked quietly. Because I complicate things? No, Otto said firmly. Because death has taken enough. Because killing Garen Slade brought no joy. Because I want our children to grow without fear. Our children? The words sent a jolt through her. They had never spoken of such things, yet the image formed instantly. Dark eyes, steady strength. Will they follow you? She asked. Who would come? Some families. My cousins. Elders who are tired of running. His thumb brushed her cheek. But I would go even if no one followed. With you alone. Humility flooded her. When? In 3 days, before the main group moves to the summer grounds. The following days blurred into preparation and farewells. To Ilyra's surprise, nearly 30 chose Otto's path. Young families, a few elders, and Senai, who announced she was too old to flee soldiers anymore. On departure morning, Rauk performed a blessing for the splinter group. Though his face remained composed, emotion flickered in his eyes as he embraced Atto. "He's proud of you," Ilyra said softly as they mounted, "even if he disagrees." Atto watched the chief walk away. He has only known the warrior's road. Then he looked at her, doubt unguarded. "I hope I am not leading them into ruin." She reached across the space between their horses and gripped his hand. "You're leading them toward hope. That is never ruin." The journey west tested them. They crossed unfamiliar land, guided by elder stories and cautious alliances with neighboring tribes. Twice they narrowly avoided army patrols. Once they hid 2 days in a narrow canyon while hostile Yavapai warriors passed nearby. Through it all, Ilyra saw Atto change. The silent warrior became a leader, listening, explaining, carrying the weight of decisions with patience and care. His dignity remained, but openness replaced solitude. On the 20th day, they crested a ridge. Below lay a valley cradled by mountains, a river threading through green grass and scattered trees. Water glinted in the sun. "It's beautiful," Ilyra breathed. Beside her, Atto straightened in his saddle, peace settling across his features. "Our beginning?" They descended as spirits lifted. Near the river they found signs of earlier Apache presence: fire rings, shelters, worn game paths. By sunset, a temporary camp stood beside the water. Fires burned, shelters rose. Against all odds, they had arrived. That night, Ilyra and Atto walked along the river beneath a sky thick with stars. Sage and pine scented the cool air. Coyotes sang in the distance, a sound that felt like belonging. Atto drew her close. "Are you happy?" he asked. Ilyra considered the question with the honesty their life demanded. Peace settled into Ilyra Knoxen with quiet certainty. After everything that had burned with Copper Ridge, she had not believed such calm was possible. She lifted her gaze to Atto. "Are you?" "I am whole again," he said simply. "Because of you." She stopped beside the river, turning to face him fully. Her heart pounded harder than any danger had ever caused. "Atto, there's something I need to tell you." She drew in a steadying breath. "I'm carrying a child, ours." For a heartbeat, he did not move. Moonlight traced the stillness of his face. Then, with a suddenness that startled laughter from her, he lifted her clear off the ground and spun her once, abandoning every trace of restraint. "When?" he asked, setting her down, hands careful on her waist. "Autumn," she said. Senai waited until she was certain. His palm covered hers against her belly. "A child," he said softly. "Our child." Emotion broke through his composure, and tears blurred Ilyra's vision. She remembered Senai's words about the wife and son he had lost, how this life did not replace them, but healed something long broken. "I never believed I would be a father again," Atto admitted. "When my son died, I sealed that part of my heart." "I know," she said gently. "Are you afraid?" He considered her question, as he always did. "Yes," he said at last, "but not enough to let fear steal this joy." They stood together as the river whispered past, her head resting against his chest, both imagining the life growing between them. It was a rare moment of stillness in lives shaped by loss. The weeks that followed were filled with purpose. Under Atto's guidance, permanent homes rose, woven shelters and mud brick dwellings along the riverbanks. Fields were planted in the fertile soil, corn, beans, squash, joined by seeds Ilyra had carried across the territory. Hunters charted the surrounding hills. Paths were mapped. By midsummer, the settlement had become something new, Apache tradition woven with practical innovations Ilyra offered from her former world. A small schoolhouse was built. There, she taught the children the stories of their people and the English they would need to survive what lay beyond the valley. Others came. A small Yavapai band seeking peace. A mixed-blood family fleeing hatred from both sides. Even a white trapper and his Navajo wife, drawn by rumors of a place where such unions were not condemned. Otto welcomed them all with one unbreakable law. Anyone who came in peace would be treated with dignity, regardless of blood or past. In a land torn by violence, the idea took root. Ilyra's pregnancy progressed smoothly. The women surrounded her with care, led by Senai, who declared herself guardian of mother and child. "The child is strong," the old woman pronounced one evening, hands firm against Ilyra's belly. "A warrior's spirit," Otto said from nearby, carving a wooden cradle. "Or a teacher's wisdom," Ilyra smiled. Senai snorted. "Both. A strength this world will need." As autumn neared, an unexpected rider appeared at the valley's edge. Lookouts raised the alarm, and Otto came to Ilyra at once. "Stay in the center," he said quietly. "A white man approaches. Alone." Fear, long absent, returned in a sharp rush. "The Pale Iron Men?" "I do not believe so," he said, "but promise me you will remain where it is safe." "I promise," she replied, one hand protectively over her belly. The settlement held its breath as Otto and several warriors rode out. When they returned, the rider came with them, calm, unrestrained. Ilyra recognized him instantly. "Elroy Vask," she murmured. The captain dismounted, removing his hat as he approached. His eyes flicked briefly to her pregnancy, surprise softened by respect. "Mrs. Otto," he said with a nod. "You look well." "Captain," she replied. "Why have you come?" "I followed your trail," he admitted. "Not by orders, by choice." Otto's posture tightened. "Why?" Elroy Vask met their eyes steadily. "Because what you are building here matters more than the uniform I wear." The valley grew very quiet. Elroy Vask continued, his voice low but steady. He spoke of rising tensions between the army and the Apache, of recent months that had hardened into something dangerous. New officers had taken command, men unfamiliar with the land, impatient with tribal customs. Harsh measures were being enforced. Reservations were forming, places where entire nations would be confined, willingly or not. "It will get worse before it gets better," Elroy said gravely. Then he gestured towards the settlement. "What you've created here, this could be another path, a living answer." "You plan to report us," Otto said, his tone edged with steel. "Turn us into a test for white policy." "No," Elroy answered without hesitation. "I want to keep this place hidden, to protect it." Murmurs spread through the gathering, a cavalry officer offering protection from his own command. "Why?" Ilyra Knoxen asked, giving voice to what everyone felt. Elroy's weathered expression softened. "Because I've spent 15 years watching people die, for orders, for pride, for fear. Solutions won't come from Washington, or from endless bloodshed. They'll come from people brave enough to build something different." That night, the council gathered. Opinions clashed. Distrust ran deep. "He could be luring us into the open," one warrior warned. "If betrayal were his goal, he wouldn't have come alone," another replied. Otto listened without interruption. When all voices fell silent, he turned to Ilyra. "What do you think, wife? You know their ways." The weight of the question pressed on her. "I believe he means what he says," she replied carefully. "But intentions change, authority changes. We accept his help, but we stay alert." Otto nodded. The decision settled. "This valley remains ours," he declared. "Not an experiment, a sanctuary, When they informed Elroy, relief showed plainly on his face. "I'll divert patrols where I can. Help with supplies if possible." His gaze swept the settlement. This deserves a chance. The next morning, as he prepared to leave, Elroy drew Ilyra aside. "There's more you should know." Her shoulders tightened. "What is it?" "Copper Ridge is being rebuilt. Survivors returned." He hesitated. "They speak of a schoolteacher who vanished. Some believe she died. Others still wait." The words struck her hard. Copper Ridge, a life she once lived. Months ago, the news would have torn her apart. Now, with Otto's child moving within her, and this valley alive with purpose, that former world felt distant, almost unreal. "Thank you," she said quietly. "But my place is here. This is my home." Elroy studied her, then nodded. "I thought so. Still, you deserve to know." After his departure, Ilyra found Otto overlooking the valley. "He told you about Copper Ridge," he said. "Yes." She took his hand. "He thought I might want to return." His grip tightened. "And do you?" She turned him toward her, cupping his face. "My home is with you. My future is here, with our child, with this people. I chose that long ago." Relief crossed his face, followed by something deeper. "I would have let you go," he said, "if that's what you wanted." "I know," she replied softly. "That's why I stay." As autumn settled in, their child was born, a son, light-skinned like Ilyra, with Otto's solemn eyes. They named him Var, meaning thunder, for the storm that shook the valley the night he arrived. Holding him in the pale dawn, Ilyra reflected on the path that led her here, from fear to safety, from exile to belonging, from a bond forged by necessity to a love that reshaped everything she was. Otto sat close beside them, his hardened features softened by a tenderness few beyond their private circle had ever seen. With almost reverent care, he brushed a finger over his son's tiny hand. "He is perfect," he murmured. "A new beginning," Ilyra Knoxen replied, resting against his shoulder, exhausted yet filled with a deep, unshakable peace. "For all of us." Beyond their dwelling, the settlement stirred awake. Voices rose in Apache, Yavapai, Navajo, and English, woven together into a harmony that would have seemed unthinkable only a year earlier. Children called to one another on their way to Ilyra's small schoolhouse. Hunters prepared for the day's ride. Women gathered to finish the last of the harvest before winter crept down from the mountains. It was not a perfect place, nor free of disagreement, but it was alive with promise. "Our son will grow up in a world we helped build," Ilyra said quietly, gazing down at Var's sleeping face. "A world where he belongs fully." Otto slipped an arm around her. "He will carry strength and mercy," he said, "the finest parts of both his bloodlines." As if answering, the baby opened his eyes, fixing them with such sharp intensity that both parents laughed. "Already questioning the world," Otto said with pride. "Just like his father," Ilyra teased. "And his mother," Otto countered, smiling, a rare, unguarded smile. They sat together, a family forged in violence and prejudice, yet rising beyond both to create something new. Beyond their walls, their experiment in harmony continued to grow, one day at a time. 5 years later, Ilyra stood at the edge of the settlement, watching 3 riders approach from the eastern trail. Their pace was steady, neither rushed nor hostile. Beside her, 5-year-old Var bounced on his heels. "Is that Elroy Vask?" he asked, shading his eyes against the morning sun. "I believe it is," Ilyra said, recognizing the straight-backed posture even at a distance. "And he's not alone this time." The settlement had grown far beyond its beginnings. What started as flight from bloodshed had become a thriving community of more than 100 souls: Apache, Yavapai, Navajo, and even a few white settlers who had married in or chosen a different life than the bitter divisions beyond the valley. Elroy Vask had become their most unexpected ally. Though officially retired from the cavalry, he still visited several times a year, bringing news, supplies, and influence enough to keep patrols away. Otto joined them, resting his hand on Var's shoulder. Their son had grown into a keen-eyed boy, quiet, observant, fluent in both Apache and English, moving effortlessly between the worlds that shaped him. "Elroy brings newcomers," Otto said, studying the riders. Ilyra felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Each arrival carried both promise and danger. "Settlers?" she asked. "We will see," Otto replied, giving her hand a brief squeeze. "Trust your husband's judgment." His teasing tone drew a small smile from her, though she knew his vigilance had never faded. As the riders drew closer, Ilyra saw that Elroy was accompanied by a white couple, travel-worn but well-kept. The woman's bonnet hid much of her face, yet something in her posture tugged at Ilyra's memory. Elroy dismounted first, greeting Otto with the ease of long familiarity. "My friend," he said, clasping his forearm, "I've brought people who searched far to find this place." The couple dismounted more carefully, the woman awkward in the saddle. When she pushed back her bonnet, Ilyra gasped. "Naira," she whispered. The girl, no longer the child she once taught, but a young woman, broke into a radiant smile. "Miss Knoxen," Naira Vale said, "I knew you were alive." Ilyra moved forward as if in a dream, embracing her former student from a town that no longer existed. "How?" she began. "My father and I were visiting family near Tucson when Garen Slade's men destroyed Copper Ridge," Naira explained, tears shining in her eyes. "When we returned, everything was gone." The man beside her stepped forward, older now, gray threaded through his beard, but unmistakably the blacksmith's broad frame. "I'm Corvin Vale," he said. "When Captain Vask spoke of an Apache leader and his white wife, a former schoolteacher, Nira was certain it was you." Otto approached, Var half hidden behind him, watching with solemn curiosity. "You were her student," Otto said gently. "Yes, sir," Nira replied, awe flickering in her eyes. "The best teacher Copper Ridge ever had." Ilyra turned to her husband, emotion swelling in her chest. "Otto, this is Naira Vale, and her father, Corvin. The past had found them at last, but not to pull them back, only to remind them how far they had come." "They are," Ilyra Knoxen said quietly. "They're dear friends from the life I lived before." She extended her hand toward her son. "Var, come meet the people who knew your mother when she taught in the white settlement." The boy stepped forward with the easy assurance of a child raised in safety and affection. "Hello," he said clearly, his English precise and unforced. "Welcome to our home." Something in that simple greeting, a child who embodied the bridge between two worlds, softened Corvin Vale's weathered expression. The former blacksmith studied the boy, then looked to Otto, then back to Ilyra. "We've heard stories about this place," Corvin said slowly. "A settlement where Apache and whites live together without fear. I didn't believe it was real, until Captain Vask persuaded us to see it with our own eyes." "It is real," Otto replied, his voice steady with quiet pride. "It is built one day at a time, sometimes with struggle, always with resolve." That evening, a welcoming feast was prepared. As custom dictated, the entire settlement gathered to share food, exchange stories, and quietly weigh whether newcomers might one day belong among them. Ilyra found herself seated between two lives. Naira Vale at her side, eyes bright with memory. Otto on her other, solid and reassuring. Var lay stretched at her feet, listening wide-eyed as Ilyra recounted tales of Ilyra's days as a schoolteacher. "She was strict," Ilyra said with a grin, "but fair. She gave us books that opened whole worlds." "My mother still teaches," Var announced proudly. "All the children learn English and Apache and numbers and stories." "Some things endure," Corvin observed, watching Ilyra with open wonder. "Even when everything else changes." As the night deepened, Elroy Vask drew Ilyra and Ahto aside, his expression sober. "Change is coming to the territory," he said. "Arizona will soon seek statehood. Federal authority is tightening. Tribes are being pushed onto reservations, by force if necessary." Ahto's jaw hardened. "And our valley? Our people?" "So far I've kept this place off official maps," Elroy admitted. "But I'm one man now, retired, with shrinking influence." He gestured toward the firelit settlement. "What you've built works. People of different origins living with mutual respect. It's what I always hoped might exist." "But you fear it won't be allowed to continue," Ilyra said quietly. "I fear that without legal recognition, you remain exposed," Elroy replied. "Which is why I've brought a proposal, and these good people who might help make it possible." His plan was bold in its simplicity. The settlement would seek recognition, not as an Indian reservation, but as a lawful township under territorial authority. Corvin Vale and other respected white residents would serve as the public representatives. "A town where Apache and whites live as equals," Elroy explained, "protected by law." "They'll never allow it," Ahto said flatly. "They want my people controlled, not equal." "Not if they see the full truth at once," Elroy agreed, "which is why the presentation must be careful. A small frontier town, diverse settlers, nothing more. Once recognized, interference would become far more difficult." Ilyra looked at her husband, seeing the conflict in his eyes. The plan required misdirection, but it might be the only path to lasting safety. "This must go before the council," Ahto said at last. "Every voice must be heard." The council's debate was fierce, stretching across several days. Some elders, especially among the Apache, rejected any tie to the white world that had brought them so much pain. Others saw the necessity of protection, of survival through adaptation. What struck Ilyra most was how much had changed in 5 years. The council was no longer only Apache men. Women spoke. Younger members spoke. Representatives from every group in the settlement took part. It was governance born not of tradition alone, but of shared survival. On the third evening, as the council reached an impasse, Sinai rose. Bent with age but sharp as ever, she commanded silence without effort. "I have lived nearly 80 winters," she said, her voice thin yet steady. "I have watched my people driven from their lands, hunted, treated as less than human." She paused, eyes moving across the gathered faces. "I have buried husbands, children, grandchildren, taken by white bullets and white sickness." Then she turned her gaze toward Var, seated solemnly beside his father, allowed to witness the council as part of his learning. "I had every reason to hate the white world until my last breath," Sinai continued. "Yet here I sit, in a place where my great-grandson carries both Apache and white blood, and I have learned to see with different eyes." She straightened, dignity radiating from her frail frame. "This place is not Apache. It is not white. It is something new. If we must use the white man's papers and permissions to protect it, then we should do so, not with shame, but with pride." Her words shifted the balance. By dawn, the council reached consensus. They would pursue Elroy Vask's plan, carefully, on their own terms, determined to protect both their freedom and the fragile, extraordinary world they had created. In the weeks that followed, the settlement reshaped its outer face while guarding its true spirit. Near the valley entrance, a modest frontier town began to take form. Simple wooden structures raised under Corvin Vale's careful supervision. Buildings that would satisfy the expectations of territorial inspectors. Beyond that visible edge, the soul of the community endured unchanged. Ilyra Knoxen found herself stepping into an unexpected responsibility. She drafted the official records that would establish the settlement, now formally registered as Harmony, a name suggested by Elroy Vask, as a lawful township. The education she had once received in Boston, long thought irrelevant to her life among the Apache, became a quiet weapon of survival. She navigated legal language with precision, fulfilling requirements while deliberately concealing the deeper truth of who they were. "You are shaping this place with words," Otto observed one evening, watching her work by lamplight as she carefully refined the township charter. "Much like I once shaped things with my hands." Ilyra looked up, catching the quiet pride in his eyes. "We're shaping it together," she replied. "As we always have," Otto said softly. His hand brushed her cheek, a familiar gesture that still carried warmth even after years together. "From the day a stubborn white schoolteacher stood before me with a small knife, refusing to show fear." Ilyra smiled faintly at the memory. "I was terrified," she admitted. "But something in your eyes told me you could be trusted," he answered. "And something in yours told me you were worth protecting, worth changing for." They had both changed. Ilyra reflected on the woman she had become. No longer the proper Boston teacher, but someone who crossed worlds with ease, who could skin a deer as confidently as she could teach grammar. Otto, once a silent warrior bound only to duty, had grown into a measured leader who chose peace whenever possible, yet never hesitated to defend what he loved. Together, they had created more than a family, though Var alone would have been miracle enough. They had built a living testament that another way of life could exist. When territorial officials finally arrived to inspect the newly recognized township of Harmony, they saw exactly what Elroy had intended them to see: a small, orderly frontier town, a schoolhouse, a blacksmith, a general store, hard-working residents going about their days. If they noticed the unusual diversity among the people, or the traditional Apache dwellings visible farther off, they made no note of it. Harmony was entered into the territorial ledger with little ceremony, just another mark on the map of westward expansion. For those who lived there, that acknowledgement meant far more. It was recognition, however limited, of their right to choose their own path. That evening, the settlement gathered to celebrate. Apache songs rose around a central fire, blending with fiddle music and dances brought by settlers. Children of mixed heritage raced through the crowd, laughter spilling freely, food from many traditions passed from hand to hand. As dusk deepened, Ilyra stood slightly apart, watching with a full heart. 5 years earlier, she had lost everything she believed defined her life. That loss had led her here, to a happiness deeper and truer than anything she had known. Octo stepped beside her, their shoulders touching with the ease of long partnership. "What are you thinking, Ashvale?" he asked softly, using her Apache name as he did in quiet moments. "I'm thinking about journeys," she said, leaning gently against him. "How the hardest paths sometimes lead to the most beautiful destinations." His arm slid around her waist. "And ours?" he asked. "Is it finished?" Ilyra looked out over Harmony, at Var teaching younger children a game that blended Apache skill with European rules, at Sinai, now frail but sharp-eyed, showing young white women how to identify healing plants, at former enemies sharing laughter beside the fire. "No," she said with certainty. "This is only the beginning." In the years that followed, Harmony would face trials, from nature and from the outside world. Not all who arrived seeking their way of life came with honest intent. Balance required constant care. The push toward Arizona statehood brought new pressures and new dangers. Yet the foundation Ilyra and Otto had laid endured. Their marriage, once born of necessity, had become a rare partnership, equal, unwavering, bound by deep respect and love. Var grew into a young man who moved easily between cultures, becoming a vital bridge between harmony and the changing territory beyond its borders. The township itself evolved from a hidden refuge into a living example. Proof that life on the frontier did not have to mean conquest or submission. Visitors came from far distances to witness what many believed impossible. Some stayed, weaving themselves into the community. Others left carrying the idea with them. On the 10th anniversary of Harmony's founding, as celebration echoed through the valley, Ilyra and Otto stood once more on the ridge where they had first looked down upon the land that would become their home. Behind them rose music, laughter, voices in many languages. "Did you ever imagine this?" Ilyra asked quietly, gesturing toward the thriving settlement below. Standing near the abandoned fort, Otto weighed her question with the same deliberate calm that had always defined him. At last, he spoke. "I imagined keeping you alive," he said quietly. "I did not imagine how you would one day guard my spirit in return, or how together we would shape something neither of us could have forged alone." Ilyra laced her fingers through his. This same hand that had once spilled blood to shield her, that had steadied her through fear, that had welcomed their son into the world. It carried the marks of every chapter they had endured. "From survival," she murmured, "to love, to purpose. That has been our path." "Our path," Otto agreed, turning fully toward her. The sunset bathed him in gold, and she could still glimpse the hardened warrior who had emerged from the shadows that first desperate day. Yet his eyes now held something far deeper. Peace, earned and unshaken. He gently brushed back a strand of her hair, silver threaded through it now. "And I would choose it again," he said. "Every step." "Even marrying a stubborn white schoolteacher?" she teased. "Especially that," he replied, a rare smile touching his lips, one he reserved for her alone. Below them, a child's voice rang out. Var was calling, impatient for them to return to the celebration. Hand in hand, they descended toward the life they had built, the future they continued shaping, step by determined step. In a land defined by bloodshed and division, they had carved out a place of balance. In an era obsessed with boundaries, they had proven that love could cross lines others believed unbreakable. What began as a marriage born of necessity had grown into something enduring and powerful, a union that challenged the world's rules and reshaped them. Their story became more than survival. It became legacy, rippling outward through every life touched by their courage to imagine a different way forward. And now, dear listener, perhaps you carry quiet burdens of your own. Strength worn like armor, love given without return, beginnings interrupted before they felt complete. Maybe, like Ilyra, life asked you to start again when you believed your chances had passed. But listen closely. It is not too late. Not too late for what still stirs your heart. Not too late to soften after years of standing firm. Not too late to choose peace. Not too late to love again. Not only others, but yourself. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you and God bless. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.